talk about pin mandrels. You've got to have a way to hold your pin blanks while you're turning them on the wood lathe. And there's two ways that you can do this. You can actually turn pins between centers, and that's another technique that I have never tried. I have seen that other people do that, but I have never tried it. And then, of course, the other way is to use a pin mandrel. And as we talked about earlier with the pin mandrel, it has a number 2 taper that basically fits into the spindle, seats down. There is a lock nut here that you can loosen with a couple of wrenches, and you can adjust this rod in and out. But the way this works is you've got a 7mm rod, and so you start according to your pin kit. You put the right bushings to match your pin kit. In this case, I've got a trim line pin kit, and I'm adding the blanks. These are going to be the barrels of my pin, and I'm adding the bushings, and then I'm going to lock all this down and tighten it down with this little lock nut here. Screws on the end of the rod, and by screwing it down, what it does is it forces the pressure down along these bushings and these blanks to lock everything into place. And you don't want to get this super tight. We'll talk about that just in a minute. But you do want to get it locked down to where you can at least begin to turn it with your roughing gouge. So here we go. We got it. We got the pin mandrel in place. We've got it locked down. By the way, this pin mandrel is called the Maxi Mandrel. I used that when I first started out. These are around $20, and they're pretty good mandrels. I'm going to talk about a second one here in a minute. But what you do now, you don't have this end supported, so you got to bring the tailstock up, and with the tip, the center point of this live center, there's a little dimple in the end of this rod that live center is just going to rest in right there. Pull that tailstock up, lock it down, and then with the quill loosened, you're going to turn your handle over here to the right, and it's going to push the quill, the tailstock, in a little bit, just a little pressure. You don't want to put a lot. All this is going to really do is support the end of this rod, so it's not going to be going anywhere. And most of the pressure is actually being applied through this little nut here. And again, you don't want to put a lot of pressure on this rod because what happens is if you do that, the rod begins to bow out. And when you do that, your pin blanks get out of center. They're not concentric anymore, and therefore you've messed up your pin. You basically have to start over. And if you do this too much, if there's too much pressure, you could permanently bend that rod, and you don't want to do that. All right, well, let's look at the second mandrel, and this is the one that I use all the time now. It's the one that I really recommend. It's called the Mandrel Saver. And you'll notice on this one, you have the Morse taper, but you also, on this one, I don't think that this rod does not adjust in and out like on the Maxi Mandrel. But anyway, you insert this in here like that. Go ahead and, as we did before, you put your blanks and your bushings over the 7mm rod. However, this time I want you to notice that on the tailstock, we've added this thing. This is called the Mandrel Saver, and it goes into the tailstock with number 2 Morse taper. But I took the live center that was in there, I took that out, and I replaced it with this. One thing you want to notice is this is hollow. So when you put this in here, back into the tailstock, and then you bring, let's see, let me put my bushing on this end. When I bring this tailstock up, you notice that the rod just goes into the Mandrel Saver. So you don't have this nut anymore here that screws down on the rod and then locks all this down. So what you've got here is you bring this tailstock up and you loosen your quill, tighten your quill up some. Don't tighten it real tight because you still could have that bowing issue like I talked about before. But the pressure now is not on the rod really at all. The pressure is mainly on the bushings. So the pressure is being transferred down through the bushings onto the pin blanks, and that's what locks them in place for you to turn. So therefore, it's a little bit better design because it changes how the pressure is being put on the pin blanks, and hopefully it cuts down on this issue of the rod bowing as much. These are a little bit more. They do cost somewhere around $26 to $28, so they're a little bit more than the Maxi mandrel. And I have read some reviews about some people having some issues with the bushings in this mandrel saver, maybe going out over time, and that could be because folks are maybe still putting a little too much pressure on this, and you still don't want to put a lot of pressure on that. So there you go. There's a couple of ways that you can hold your pin blanks and begin turning pins. And I hope you enjoyed this video. That concludes part 2. In the next video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about pin blanks. So thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Take care.